Good afternoon and welcome to Conducting a Job Interview the effective way and a very fair way as well. Job interviews is something that we have to deal with as small business owners in many different times. And if you're not even at the point yet of having a business that's quite large enough to interview for employees, please do be aware though, eventually your business will get to a point where you need to hire someone, whether that's a virtual assistant or a contractor or somebody who is a bit more full-time oriented. It won't matter because you'll need to employ them anyway. I'm going to share my screen and get underway. Let's get it going. First up, a quote from Yogi Berra, a great of baseball in the US. Before you build a better mousetrap, it helps to know if there are any mice out there. And this is what we want to know. We want to be able to get those employees in. We want to trap them in. Well, that's a really horrible analogy, but you know what I mean. Attract them into us. But at first, we need to know if there's any out there. And some of that's due to the fact that we may be maybe in a slump of employment where at the moment it's very hard to hire people, or it could simply be that we've got a bad reputation as an employer ourselves, and we might need to consider how we do those job interviews because people talk to each other. If someone has a bad example or a bad experience in a workplace, they will tell the people in their lives. Before we get underway, let's look at what we're going to look at today, which is conducting an effective hiring interview. We'll do a bit about preparing for the interview, the right questions to be asking your person you're interviewing, doing the interview, and assessing the applicant in the interview, which is really important to be as efficient as possible in these interviews because they can suck so much time out of you. This is brought to you by Business Station and the Australian Small Business Advisory Services Digital Solutions Program in conjunction with Business Station in the WA, Regional Development Australia Brisbane in Queensland, and Treaty Business Consulting covering the Northern Territory. This will be available later on today through my own channel, which is Dante St James on YouTube. Or if you want to see even more options of different presenters and advisors from the program, just look for Business Station on YouTube as well. Bit about me before we get away. Marketing and business information systems at the University of New South Wales. About 6 different levels of certification from the Chartered Institute of Marketing in the UK. Worked with the New South Wales government, the TAFE New South Wales programs to get micro certifications and credentials on lots of different individual systems and things like cybersecurity. I work with Facebook's Blueprints trainer program globally and also within the Australian New Zealand core. I'm a Facebook Blueprints certified digital marketing associate and media planning professional as well. And we have quite a lot of different government programs and other tech company programs that I work for as well, including Google's Digital Springboard and the Be Connected, ASBAS Digital Solutions, and New Business Assistance with NICE programs. So first, an introduction to the whole scenario, I suppose, of going into interview land. The opportunity you have when you're doing an interview is it's a tool for matching the best possible person for the job. It's not just simply trying to catch people out. And a lot of people like to think of job interviews as something where you're trying to catch someone out. It's not that at all. It's the best way of matching the best possible applicant to fill the role that you want them to fill. It's an opportunity for you to choose from a range of people and do it in a fair and equitable manner that allows you to get the best possible candidate for that job. And there's so many people out there with so many skills. It'd be really stupid to go in there with any kind of prejudgments or prejudices or any of those sort of things that would stop you from choosing the best candidate simply because of some sort of prejudice you may hold going into the process. Now we'll continue knowing that it takes a bit of work, not only during the interview, but before it as well. There's some preparation you should be doing before the interview, some preparation you do during the interview as you're just walking in, and of course in the interview itself. That's probably the part we know the best. But there's a lot of work that goes on with job interviews that happens after the interview. So there's so many resources out there for people who want to go to a job interview. But what about those of us who will be interviewing? I've interviewed probably maybe a couple of hundred people in my life. And over that time, I've learned a lot of tools and tips, which I'll include in here. And I'll give some stories along the way of how I might have made mistakes and how I've come back from those as well. But in addition, we'll also look at some time tested and true ways of ensuring you have the best possible job experience, interview process for both yourself and for your candidates. Now, when it comes to preparing for the interview, like all things in life, preparation is absolutely everything. So let's look first. Before they walk into the door, you want to make sure that you review the current job description for the role that you want to fill, not just the person who's going for the job. It's important for them to know the details of the job. Yes, absolutely. But it's just as important for you to know what the job is that you're trying to fulfill. Now, you may be a part of describing that job description. You may have been part of this process leading up, but it is important, I think, before every single candidate walks in, that you review the current job description yourself. Make sure that it's fresh in your mind. Make sure that you understand what the actual mandatory skills are that are in there, what the nice to haves are, and understanding what it is you're really, really looking for. Because if you're just looking for a person to fill a gap, then you're probably going to be disappointed with the person you're going to get. If you're just looking for a person who makes you feel good about yourself, looks like a bit of a yes man or a yes woman, then you'll be disappointed with the work outcomes that they'll give you. But if you walk in there knowing fully what that job role involves, fully what that job role has part of it, even if you're not the person who makes the ultimate decision and you're consulting to the person who does, because quite often 2 or 3 people go in there. It's not just the one person. It could be 2 or 3 of them. You brought in someone who you work with, someone who's currently working a role similar, and you bring them in as well. It's really important for all of you to read through that current job description and make sure you really know what's going on with that particular role. So ask yourself, once you've done that, what are the absolute non-negotiable must-haves of that role? Even though there might be certain things listed as mandatory, certain things listed as selection criteria, just look at what absolutely has to have. Now, you know your business, you know what's required, you know what goes wrong and what goes right, and what the strengths of your current team are and the weaknesses of your current team. But what you may not have a very good capture of is, when it comes down to it, out of those 8 things you've listed as must-haves, what ones of those actually are must-haves? Because that's what you need to go in judging on, not what's on the paper, but what you know as the business owner, as the person who has either worked that role or you've trained people in that role before. You know what they really need, and it might need a review. You might need to cross a couple off, or you might need to add something else on. That's something which you should have done before you sent out that job description to other people, but at the same time, it's something which you can bring into the interview and say, hey, apologies, we do have a mandatory for this. Do you have that? Then look at what the responsibilities are, because it's not ever just that people do a thing. They don't just do a job. There's always a responsibility involved. They'll hold some sort of ownership over some kind of a responsibility in your workplace. So whether that's they are responsible for checking your calendar, they're responsible for checking your inbox, they're responsible for building websites using WordPress, or they are responsible for cold calling people, whatever the role is you're looking for them to fulfill, really outline what the responsibilities are. And also, what are the things as far as responsibilities of the soft skills, not just the very defined software skills or the hardware skills or the people skills, but also some of the lighter skills, such as the ability to be able to communicate clearly and empathetically through email, which is something that so many businesses do not do very well at all. They're very, very, very blunt and to the point when it comes to a lot of that stuff. Or look at what are the cross responsibilities they may have with someone else, where, for instance, they do a role, or someone else does another role, but they overlap in some areas. Like knowing who is actually in charge of that particular overlap area where they both work in it. Then, once you know what the must-haves are and understanding what the responsibilities are, we look at what the nice-to-haves are. So the nice-to-haves could be, yes, they've got a Bachelor of IT, but they've also got a certification in Facebook media planning, or they've got a certification they've got the Google Digital Garage Digital Marketing Fundamentals Certificate, something like that. You can say, look, it's not vital they have it, but it'd be really nice if they do, because then they know that they've gone through a process of learning and have been assessed on something, and they know what they're they're talking about in a wide range of things to do with, say, digital marketing. Or it could be that they are someone who has some experience with your particular industry, if that's homewares, if that's fashion, if that's alternative medicine, all those different things there may be some tie-ins with. Do they have that? That becomes one of your nice to haves. And that's definitely something you may want to consider as being something important to you, even though it's not a must have, and they don't absolutely have to have it. But those nice to haves are kind of like, when you're working a lump of clay on a wheel, and it's nice to have the clay and it's nice to have the wheel, but it's nice to have that ability to be able to shape that clay into something absolutely beautiful. And then also look at, what are the things that you're absolutely willing to provide some level of training in, whether you need to put them through training courses, put them through online training courses. So I know, for instance, I'm a member of the Australian Computer Society, or ACS, and it comes with a very broad, hundreds of courses you can take as part of that, part of the professional development of you as an IT professional. So likewise, most industries have something like this, where you can actually refer people through to online learning. Or are there skills that they are very specific about the job and the company you have, or the business you have, that you need to teach them themselves? And if that's the case, then we look at things like, let's just say, the things that you're willing to provide training in are, say, Excel spreadsheets, or it could be typing things in this particular way, or working with this particular kind of program, or working with this particular kind of downline operational data that helps you to run the affiliate marketing side of your business. Whatever those systems are, or those processes are that you work with, they're the things you have to look at as, okay, this is something that I need to do. This is something that I need to work with. Now, the candidate, they come into each one of these interviews, and this is why you need to be prepared, not only with reading all the stuff that's to do with the job and knowing what the must-haves and the nice-to-haves are. They come in with a pretty good knowledge, or at least they should come in with a pretty good knowledge of what the job description says. They will be using this job description as the base for all the decisions and all the answers they're going to make when it comes to, running the running the interview from their point of view. So from their point of view, they're running something which says, okay, I must know how to do this particular thing because this is part of the job I'm doing, or I must know how to delegate work responsibly, and that's a mandatory part of my job. They will come in using every word of that job description as the basis for which they answer their questions, and for the questions they will ask you as well. So they don't have any sort of extra, context of what's going on around all that. They don't have the context of, what happens in your business. So they don't have the context of what happens even in other businesses like it. They may not have worked in your industry ever at all. So for them, this is completely fresh to them and completely new to them. And so they're not necessarily in a position to know the bigger picture of what's going on. So they will use the one piece they have, often the job description. They'll also be looking into reading into both your job description and things like Facebook and LinkedIn and other online sources like your website. They're reading into it to understand the culture of your workplace and the way to approach things. Now, if the job description is highly highly formalized and highly, written with a lot of big words and long sentences and a lot of, it feels like you're reading the contract for insurance. Well, then you might find that they walk in and think that your culture is actually pretty staid and very stoic. And they get in there and find it's very casual, and they feel, oh, okay, I did not expect this at all. This is really different to what I expected. So it could be important for you to make sure that things like job descriptions are written in the language of the workplace, not written in legalese, but written in enough casual language that they can relate to what's going on there and get an idea of what the culture of your workplace is, and that it matches what they see on things like social media and websites. Now, yes, you have to agree, you have to put a certain amount of legalese into job contracts and job descriptions, simply because, sometimes employees aren't quite that great, and you might need to find a way to get rid of them, or you might need to find a way to, manage them in some sort of respect, or performance manage them. So it's important to have everything correctly in there, but there's also a way of you writing that is more casual or more formal, depending on the kind of workplace you are. Now, your candidate is likely going to be more prepared, more prepared for that interview than you are. You're preparing for perhaps 20 interviews. They're preparing for one. So they're going to be very prepared for this. They're going to know the job description. They're going to know what the selection criteria are and what the mandatories are and what the nice to haves are. And they're going to be looking for opportunity to tell you how they can fit those things. So you've got to be ready to respond to those things as well, and to ask the key questions about their suitability based upon their answers to key selection criteria and the nice to haves and must haves as well. They might essentially know the job description a whole lot better than you, which is not a bad thing. That's someone that detail oriented. I'd be looking at them far beyond the answers in their interview and look at them as a potential person for, I guess, providing some really good understanding of your business further down the track. And if they can retain that knowledge and then match that with their actual lived experience in your workplace, they could be a very valuable advocate for your business and someone who could, essentially be managing things like your company's LinkedIn page. Now, before they walk in the door, it's your job to read the resume thoroughly, and you want to understand who exactly it is that you're interviewing. You want to get an idea of, as well as them reading into the culture of your workplace by the job description and the things they see online. You need to kind of get an idea into them. And I always find it very, very useful to go and not just look at who walks through the door, but to actually get a bit of context about them beforehand. So I'll always going to be, doing something like, doing a bit of research about them previously. Google's a powerful beast. Should you or should you not Google potential job people for a job before you see them? Now, a lot of union people are like, oh no, you shouldn't. That's just really, really unethical and all that. But I'm like, it's public knowledge. Like, it's just like looking at, prisoner records or, knowing that somebody is a sex offender. You want to be able to know what you're getting yourself into. These people are coming very intimately into your business and can have a very far-reaching effect for good or for bad on your business. So yeah, I Google the hell out of them, and also go on the Facebook and I look for them. I go on the Instagram and look for them. I go and look all over the place for them. Now, most millennials and probably the Gen Z are excellent at this. Actually, Generation Z are awesome at just not making anything publicly known about them online. They're very clever about that. Boomers are terrible at it. Generation X, which is me, we're not particularly great at it. We like sharing all our dirty laundry online. We're the people who are always, having all the, letting people know everything about us. They're those ones. The millennials are a little bit better than us, but they still, by and large, like to share their lives online, particularly through things like Instagram. But what I also know is that when you get to look at things like social media, let's just say you find a candidate and you are looking at their Instagram profile, and you notice on their Instagram profile that they go to a lot of cafes and they seem to eat a lot of really interesting food. Now, why would that be of any interest to you as the interviewer? It gives you an icebreaker. You'd say something like, hey, I saw your Instagram and absolutely love the photos you take of that food. It looks incredible. Like, you must go to a different cafe every week. And it just breaks it down a bit. First of all, they go, oh, you see my Instagram, but they're usually proud of their Instagram. Otherwise they'd hide it. And they go, oh, you see my Instagram? Yeah. I absolutely love your photos. You really capture, the essence of those foods you're reviewing. And I really love the work you're doing there. And it lets them think, you know what? I feel a bit more safe now to be a bit more myself. And they might break down a few walls of that. But that's part of the journey. Understanding who that person is on social media and understanding who that person is on Google is not necessarily understanding who that person is in person. So when they come to that in-person time, when they look at that interview they're having with you, it's also important for you to read the resume completely thoroughly so you understand who the person is you're interviewing, understanding their education, understanding their extracurricular stuff, understanding what they've listed as their previous job roles and the skills and experiences they've gathered. Quite often you'll find that if they're fresh out of university, they don't have a lot of job experience, particularly if they've done something like law and journalism, for instance, as a combination. It might be a little bit hard for them to find work because the lawyers don't want them, the journalists don't want them. They didn't have any work experience during uni because simply they were too busy studying a double degree. Then you may have to look at some of the extracurricular things they did. Were they in a society of some sort? Did they do volunteer work somewhere? And if they did do some sort of part-time or casual work, what was it they did, and what are the skills they may have picked up from those? Even if they were pulling beers at a bar, or they were serving tables at a restaurant, or they were making coffee in a cafe, those things do require certain amounts of skill and can also tell you a lot about what they'll do with the jobs that you give them. A barista is very good at details. They're very good at consistency. So if you want someone who ticks those boxes, seeing that they've previously been a barista is a very good way of identifying that there's someone who's very good with repetitive tasks and very, very good at keeping things consistent over those repetitive tasks. It might be someone who is a waiter in a restaurant or a food service person, and you go, well, if they've had to face that many clients so many times, they get in some very stressful situations and they know how to handle people who are not always particularly nice to them. That's a really good sign that they could be someone who's a good client services or a account manager with your business as well. So understanding, looking inside, deeper inside what's in the resume, not just looking at what they've done, look at the extra stuff they've done. You find some real gold in there. Now, the resume, you want to look for questions around their previous roles and jot them down, the kind of questions you want to ask. So if you see that, for instance, there was a 2-year gap in their resume, ask them about it. It'd be really interesting to see what they did. Did they go traveling the world? That's not a bad thing. That's a wonderful thing. In fact, that's given them new experiences, a new level of maturity, and a new appreciation for the world in general. And then you look at maybe some things like, for instance, they did a job that was maybe a little bit out of their usual industry they work in. And so you can ask about that. What was it took you to try this job in the textiles industry? And they go, well, I really enjoyed working with my grandmother when I was a little kid, and we used to do a lot of sewing. So I took up a job working a lot more textiles because I wanted to learn more about that and understand the passion my grandma had. And also just to see if that was a new level of a career I could go to. And if not, I could always come back to what I'm doing now. Really, really good answers. And when you see that kind of, transparency with people, they're actually explaining what their motives were for doing different things in their career, it teaches you a lot more about the person. It shows you that they're an innovator. They're willing to take risks. They're willing to try new things. They're not always going to get stuck in the same rut. So that could be a really good thing for someone to do, and someone to have those sort of life skills of being able to pivot very quickly from one thing to the next. Look for questions around the gaps. So there's going to be gaps in their resume. Everyone's got gaps in their resume. So it'd be, for instance, you've got this Microsoft one, but then you didn't get these 3, but then you got this one. What was the reason there? Because could simply be they focused on other things. So for instance, my own resume would have a gap in there of, well, you did this business information systems and you studied this, but why didn't you then go and study a diploma in social media? And it's quite simply because the diplomas and the certificates in social media that are going around these days are complete rubbish. They're pretty much obsolete the day that they're actually rolled out, because they get reviewed very, very rarely. They don't get reviewed during the process. They're very, very generic. And a lot of the information in them, by the time you learn it and then go out to apply it, is completely obsolete. So look for things like that and then ask questions. Say, I just noticed you got this, this, and this. Why didn't you get this as well? They go, oh, I ran out of money. I quite simply ran out of money and time, and I needed to actually get to work. And that could be a great way of knowing, okay, this is someone who sees realistic value in things rather than, placing artificial value on the things that don't really matter that much in life. Ask questions about people's hobbies. It's not a scary thing to do, and it's actually a really appropriate thing to do. If they've listed them in their resume, ask about them. Some people have the most amazing things they do. Their volunteer work they do, the things they do when it comes down to, I do gardening with my mother. That sort of thing could be fascinating to talk about. And when you ask people about themselves, when you talk to people about themselves, you can talk with them for hours. You've got their ear and they've got yours, and it gives a chance for them to really give an insight into the kind of person they are. Are they a kind person? Are they a very logical person? Are they more cold? Have they got a warm heart? Are they someone who's a communicator? Are they a listener? Are they introverted, extroverted? Are they somebody who is, very concerned with social justice, or are they someone who's very laissez-faire? Whoever they are, you'll uncover that more or less around their hobbies than their actual job titles that they've had in the past. Their job titles will tell you what they're capable of doing in a workplace, but it won't tell you the kind of person that they are. And then Look for the questions around the moves they've made. I've had some massive moves in my life. If I was going to go and get a job now, I'd have to explain why I've lived in every capital city except Adelaide. They might say, why not Adelaide? That's probably the one that comes up the most. Or they go, what is it? Why did you keep moving around so much? And I say simply, I'm a bit of a nomad. I need to move around a bit, which is important for me to have roles and jobs and businesses that I can do from home, because that's the sort of thing I need to do to live the life I want to live. Next week I'm taking off to New South Wales. Sounds like a scary place to go to. Now, it's regional New South Wales and the North Coast. I may or may not be able to get in and out. I'll be able to get in. I just won't necessarily be able to get out. So there's some scary stuff there that might prevent me from getting back into Queensland after being in New South Wales. So that's something I'll definitely have to watch. But those kind of moves and those kind of things in my life were very important for me to be able to bring into any sort of roles I've done. I cannot sit in someone else's office and workplace for too long. It just gets to me, and I need to be in my own environment to be working my best. I'll work my best for you if I don't have to work right next to you in an office. It's not really the thing that a lot of employers are looking for. So before they walk in the door, so we're still in the time before you've actually done the interview. Before they walk in the door, allow enough time so you're not rushed and you've got those vital questions don't get skipped. It's really important the vital questions get asked to every single person who comes in. They get the equal amount of time to spend explaining what it is they do and who they are. You want to allow for all participants to have their say. You want to allow at the start to familiarize yourself with them and for them to familiarize themselves with you. And then allow time at the end for some initial thoughts with your co-interviewers, or even with yourself, just taking down notes to review the notes and go, you know what, I want to see that person again. And allow time, this is super important, and this very often doesn't happen. Allow time for the candidate to ask questions of you. An interview is not just a one-way street. It's not just you interviewing them. They're also interviewing you, especially in an employee's market, which it certainly is right now. They can dictate a lot more terms. They can go and get a lot more jobs, and there's so many jobs available right now and very few people to fill them. So they know that. So they need to be able to interview you to know that this is the place where they want to be as well. So what are the right questions to ask once you're actually in the interview? Before each interview, you have a list of questions ready to go. So each candidate is fairly compared. So these are your must-ask questions. So you have a set of those for every single interview you'll do with every single person you'll see for this particular role. This keeps it fair and equitable. It allows you to make sure that each candidate had the chance to answer each one of those questions. And those question types that you'll then go with is particular kinds of questions. Now, some of those are going to be open-ended. Some of them will be self-appraisal. Some of them will be accomplishment questions. Some will be broad brush questions. Some will be comparison questions. What does all this mean? I know it's a whole bunch of corporate words. Let's dig down a bit deeper because these will sound a bit more familiar with you. The open-ended question is things like about the what, how, and why. So they're things that you cannot answer with a yes or a no. So you have to actually answer with some kind of detail. So questions may be what experience you've had managing cross-functional teams, whatever that means. So it's all to do with, teams that do more than just one thing. What experience have you had with managing teams that are maybe spread out? You've had to deal with a team over there, a team here, and a team over there. Or how were you able to make the move so quickly in the management for those people who were, accelerated in their careers? I had a lot of acceleration early in my career in IT and also in my career as a radio announcer, for instance. So they'll ask you, how are you able to go from that to that so quickly? And there's usually a great story in there that's often to do with talent, tenacity, being in the right place at the right time. People being very, very honest about, the fact that, well, I was the next in line, so it just sort of happened, or saying, I actually worked my ass off for a year and made sure that I was in that position to be able to interview for that role. And yep, I got it. And then things like, why do you think that your colleagues initially made it difficult for you to fit in? So that's not something you can answer with just a yes or no. They have to really, bring out something that's got some truth. Now, most of these questions shouldn't be hard for someone to answer if they're telling the truth. Something like, why do you think your colleagues initially made it difficult for you to fit in? You can say, well, basically it's because I don't look like them. I don't talk the same language as them. I have quite broken English perhaps, or it's just simply that I come from a very different place than the rest of them do. And so I guess that they were really suspicious of how I got the job. And I had to really earn my stripes over a good year to show them I was really capable of doing this rather than having some sort of preferable treatment because of some prejudice they may have held. Having that sort of really solid answer that comes through. So these are your chance to understand if people are lying, because quite often if people are lying, they have to think about the answer first. They go, what am I going to say that's not going to incriminate myself? I'll just make up a story here. And when they have to think of a story like that, very few of us are able to just go pull it out of thin air. We have to really think deeply to come up with a convincing story that won't expose us as some kind of fraud. A self-appraisal question allows them to analyze their own performance in previous jobs. Like, for instance, what were some of those challenges and how did you overcome them? It's a great question because, again, it's open-ended, but allows them to appraise themselves. So what you'll say is, well, those challenges and how do I overcome them by working hard and sticking to the goals and making sure I knew the company values. And then, that just sounds so generic. But when they say something like, well, the challenges were really hard, I really had to draw in, I guess, help from other people because no way I was ever going to be able to handle it on my own. So I had to, go to my boss and say, who in the team has got a bit of spare capacity? Do you think they might be able to help me out with this? And that shows a willingness to collaborate, a willingness to communicate up the chain, not just receive communication down the chain. Questions such as, did you feel the way you handle it was the best way to have handled it? It's a great open-ended self-appraisal question because you go, well, there was times when it was really doubtful if it's the best way to handle it because it didn't really work for the first couple of weeks. But after a few weeks, as people got used to it, things started to work a little bit better. And yeah, I think in hindsight, it's easy to say, you know what, it was the best way to handle it, but that's because it turned out right. If it didn't turn out right, it may not very much have been the best way to handle it. It was that I had to use the resources and the tools and the ideas that I had at my disposal in a crunch at the time. And then a question such as, what was the one thing that you thought you could have done much better at? That's quite often like the question you get asked is, so what's the one weakness you have? And people go, I think it's because I care too much. I think I work too hard. And that sort of answer is just, it's so not real and so not fair and so not great. It's really kind of, yeah, it makes you feel deflated as an interviewer to hear someone say that stuff. But if you say, what was the one thing you thought you could have done much better at? And we just say, well, actually, I could have communicated more clearly at the time of this happening. I kind of got down into the work of doing it and just completely forgot to keep communicating back to people what my status was. And at the end, I wasn't working in line with the team. I was just working, trying to get my stuff done. And yeah, I'd say that's one thing I could have done better is, as I was going, communicate back to the top. So you give them a chance to appraise how they went in a really honest way, and to be able to bring to the fore some of the things they didn't do so great, because they'll be able to share their achievements in the achievement type questions, which is these ones, the accomplishments questions, where you're looking for, to give examples of a practical experience in real work situations. So it could be a question like, what specific responsibilities, excuse me, did you have in your previous role? So you're asking them to explain almost a bit of a job description of the job they had previously done. So if that job was like, for instance, a job that involved them, I don't know, maybe working in a cafe, and we had to find out whether they were the cafe manager, or they were a barista, or they were a food expediter or something like that, then we'd know to ask the questions around that. But the whole, things about around, what your part in an overall project could be, that's a great question, because it allows them to say, well, actually, I was really quite pivotal in that because, excuse me, this cough's come from nowhere. The part in the project could be something like, for instance, you were playing the communications role. You're the person who is the project manager who to report things back to the client and to the client service manager. And that part of the project involved me having to ensure that there was a smooth flow of communication between everybody, that every I was dotted, every T was crossed, and everything that had to be communicated was communicated clearly and in a timely fashion. So you get to see what the good things they were. In the previous screen, we of course noticed that self-appraisal sometimes was looking about the things that challenged them. But this one, the accomplishment questions, are all about the things they actually did accomplish, the things that they actually were able to achieve. So they're able to shine in this part. And how are you able to add your own skills and experience to the team's success is a really good question, because it allows you to ask how they contributed to a wider company factor or a wider project, something that's beyond them, that they were a small part of it or a large part of it. You can then say, they can then appraise how they worked with other people. Another question type is the broad brush questions. These are big picture, not very specific. Things like, what can you tell me about managing offshore assistants? So you're not looking for them to show their experience necessarily, but you may want them to show some degree of knowledge. What do you know about digital marketing is a really big, broad brush question, but perhaps you could drill down that a bit more and say, what do you know about the decreasing reach of organic posts on Facebook? And they can give you some sort of description about why that is. So they can go, okay, this is the way, this is why it's happening, and this is a way around it. So you can see their ability to be able to face a challenge, accept that the challenge is there, and then be able to work on that challenge to make things better. Things like, what's the most challenging thing about working with customers on social media? Allow them to look at bigger picture questions, not necessarily the things they've had experience with, but the things they understand about an industry or about a role or about a particular circumstance that they can answer confidently about. Things like, what's the opinion on the effect of grants and the ability for small business to stand on its own over time? Some questions like this are great because they go, well, the problem is, if the business is used to getting enough grants during certain years where they pretty much supplemented their entire sales team's inability to sell, when those grants dry up, that sales team suddenly does need to sell, and they're not going to do that when they've had a really, really easy run of it for the last 3 years. So looking at big picture organizational, industry, and even societal things like that. Don't go down the point of asking about their politics and asking about their religious background. That's kind of none of your business. But what is your business is, I guess, how they think about certain issues that affect your business and your industry, rather than issues that affect the nation and race laws and race relations and all that kind of thing. That stuff is not necessary. Comparison questions are great because this tells you how they think and express themselves. So it means that if they're a black and white or a shades of gray kind of person, a glass half full or a glass half empty kind of person, you get a great idea out of this by asking these questions that allow them to compare one thing to another, particularly when it comes to things like, how would you compare leading a team to being a team member? So you start to see people who, you start to understand their ethic, you start to understand their way of thinking and their approach to jobs and their approach to hierarchies as well, which is just as important of whether they can do the job, is knowing how they can do that job and do it well within the limits that you would have. Asking how is it different working for a big business as opposed to a small business allows them to explain the pros and cons. And this is what you actually want about these comparison questions, is that ability for someone to have had some level of critical thinking. And when I say critical thinking, they're able to critique things. They're able to go, look, that particular way of doing it in small business has a lot of things going for it, like this, and this. But the offset of that is that quite often small businesses don't really grow fast enough to provide any kind of revenue to support someone's life. So they often just fold before they can ever scale, because they've only ever been built to support the one person who actually owns that small business. For any comparison questions, your open-ended questions, all your different kind of questions, it all comes down to then doing the interview, going into the actual interview and doing the thing. So what do you want to do when you get in that interview is help reduce the stress for everyone in it. There's a routine you can do to ensure the experience is absolutely as comfortable as possible for you, for your co-interviewers, and for the interviewee as well. Keep having to wet my throat because it's very, very gluggy today. So follow a routine to make sure everyone's comfortable. That routine can be, number one, be on time. Not just them be on time, you be on time. It's really helpful to understand that their time needs to be respected as much as your time needs to be respected. It is so important to make sure that you respect the person you're sitting across the table from. You can't just expect them to respect you. You also have to respect them. You have to understand that they also need to feel like you have some respect from them. So that works as well. Starting with an icebreaker before questions is really important because it allows you to be people, allows you to be a person who's able to be, I guess, understood as a human being, not just as a role or a job. If you're understood as a human being, it allows you to very, very simply and easily be able to, I guess, understand each other in a more empathetic way, not just in a way that ties you as I am boss, you are subservient to me. This is what we do. Here's your expectations. Run along now. It understands that people will be much more easily opening up to you if they feel safe to open up to you. And an icebreaker helps do that. So ask questions and then actually let them answer. Now, this seems like a no-brainer, but it's actually really, really, really bad because so many people don't do this. They ask the questions and then they almost like just tune out. They just, oh yeah, I'm just gonna look over here and just we'll move away and just go, yeah, okay, all right, all right. And they come back like, okay, you answer that question. Here's my next question. There's such a thing in life where it's many people get in the conversations and they're really only not really listening to what you're saying. They're just waiting for you to shut up so they can say their next thing. And so many interviewers do this. I've been in interviewers when I was younger that this was exactly what they were doing. They didn't care about what my response was. What they cared about was just understanding that, that you have that you just answered something and they want to move on. They just want to ask their next question. They want to be the star of the show. They're not looking for you to be the star of the show as the interviewee. They want to be the star of the show. I particularly remember one interview I had back in, would have been 1998 or 99, a long time ago. And it was just awful. It was just this awful interview I had where there's this one person wasn't really prepared, but cared. And there's this other guy who just was almost just wanting to trip me up all the time. And that was a really hard thing. That was a really difficult thing to be able to, to be able to work with. It was actually a horrible interview to have. I got the job and then got into the job and had no idea what I was meant to do. No one was there to lead me or guide me into what I was meant to do. So I had no idea what I was doing. I was filling a seat. And it was really weird to be there. It just didn't make a lot of sense. So steer back to the topic at hand when you do. Now, quite often the icebreaker and any sort of questions about hobbies and things they do outside of work and extracurricular stuff can lead you a bit astray and take you off track. So when you as the interviewer really have to take control of those things and actually bring it back to the next lot of questions and then go, okay, that's really good to know. Thanks for that. Now, we've got a bit off track here, but let's steer it back to blah. This happens in every interview, every time, especially when you build a rapport and you kind of like the person who's across the other side of the table from you. You actually want to talk more about them and hear more of what they've got to say. That problem is, though, that they then, I guess, get a little too comfortable and they can take the conversation way off track. And also be transparent about potential issues with the role. Pretending that nothing's wrong and tricking people into a job just because you need to fill a role is actually not just bad ethics, it's bad humanity. It's a really nasty thing to do. So be transparent around those potential issues and understand that there are actually things that you need to address there. Then we move on to, I guess, the next part of it, which is the pitfalls. Now, the pitfalls of job interviews are for any interviewer at all that they can be very quick to perform an opinion based on the first handshake. There's so many men that still regard a man who doesn't shake a hand strong like they're trying to pull your hand off. Whew, that's that's a really poor thing to base your opinion about a human being on, is the length and the power of their handshake. And people who are still going around these days, business coaching and telling people to firm up their handshake like you did in the 80s, because you'd be considered to be a bit of a sissy if you didn't have a really good handshake. Those people need to be, not listened to anymore and disregarded, because it's just such a horrible, discriminatory thing to do. And it discounts the fact that, that not all women have the strength to pull. Not all men have that strength to pull a really strong handshake. Some people actually have pain and things like carpal tunnel syndrome and all that kind of thing. They can't do that. So don't be too quick to form your opinion about them. Keep that open mind as long as you possibly can, because you never know. There's going to become this question that comes and really turns you around. The problem is when you try to base your opinion on the first 2 minutes of an interview, is that your opinion can get stuck and you can't move past that lisp they had, or that weak handshake that they had, or the way that they walked in the door, or the way they didn't know where to sit, or the way that they were awkward talking about the icebreaker. That's not what you judge them entirely on. There's so much more to judge them on. Experience and performance only tell part of the story. This is important. This is why I've talking about people's personal habits and hobbies and extracurricular work and all that sort of thing. Because the things they did in their jobs, the things that they were able to, list down, I did this at this job and this role, and I reported to this person, and here's how I did it, and this is what I did. That kind of stuff just tells only a part of the story. The rest of the human lives in the other 16 hours of the day. The 8 hours that they're at work isn't what they are. That might be just a part of who they are. But there's that other 16 hours they live. Now, assume 8 hours maybe, because 8 of those hours they're probably sleeping. But in the other 8 hours of a day, that's where you find who that person is. And you might find a little lump of diamond right in that lump of coal there. I would also say that just because someone's not quiet, because someone's not extroverted and they're a bit quiet and they're a bit reserved, doesn't mean they're uninterested in the role or uninterested in your work. Some people, their excitement is very much on the inside. They might not even be particularly excited about your role, but they're enthusiastic about it. But you may not see that because the way they express themselves, the way they communicate, they may be neurodiverse. So there's all sorts of conditions and differences of the way that people think that will contribute to a very different response to how they would be perceived by you as being enthusiastic or non-enthusiastic. You'll see the enthusiasm for the job in the detail of answers for those people who are not particularly over the top and extroverted and really want to jump across the table and give you a big kiss because they love the idea of working for your company so much. Quiet and reserved people are often the better workers because they understand the limits, they understand the boundaries, and they understand that the job doesn't necessarily involve them to be excited. It involves them being reliable and impressive to work with. Also, check your biases. We all have them. I did a webinar a couple of weeks ago on what we call unconscious biases, and it's a really important one that forms around an opinion you'll have walking into that interview before you've even met the person. You'll form that based on things like the photo on their resume, if they had one, their use of English in certain things. Your biases will happen on race, gender, religion, sexuality, all those kind of things. Make sure that you put a lid on those and really try your best. Now, biases are really natural and they happen to all of us, but you try your best to leave those at the door when you go in there, that you're actually looking at that person based upon that person, not based upon their features, right? And check your stereotypes as well. Your stereotypes about men to women, gay to straight, from trans to cisgender, from, black to white to brown to, Pacific Islander. Look, put all those stereotypes aside. You're only judging this person on their ability to be able to fulfill the role and fit into your team. Don't use cultural fit, that term, as an excuse for kicking someone out. It's your responsibility as an employer to ensure that there is a cultural fit for everyone in your workplace, not just for the majority who happen to form one particular kind of cultural background. Then you need to assess things after the interview. And this is where we go to a point where we go, well, we've done the interview, we've done all the preparation for it. Now we need to make sure that we're actually making the right decisions based upon that interview after the interview. So when you're doing all this, think beyond the really obvious stuff. Your assessment is not just about their history and not just about their experience. It's about more than that. It's about feel. It's about how you can picture them working in this particular thing as well. The 90% of communication, isn't really coming out of words. There's so many other ways that people communicate. Words are not the only answer to the question. Sometimes somebody's facial expression could give, or their physical demeanor, their body language, their physical cues could tell you a lot about how they really think about that. So if you ask someone, how do you feel about a workplace that is, very open and doesn't have a lot of closed doors and it's very much an open planned office? How do you work about that? And they go, it's a really important for really clear communication. And you see they're frowning and then their shoulders are dropped and they're sat back and they're like, oh, I don't really like that, but they're saying the words, the right words. Say, oh yeah, yeah, I feel that's a really efficient way of teams communicating and staying in touch. But what they're really saying is, oh, not another damn open-ended office where I'm just going to be, you know, bombarded by sound and chatter and noise all day and all night. Look for the emotional triggers that should be noted. Now, this is not so you can exclude someone. This is definitely not so you can exclude people. What this is the ability for you to be able to make some notes about how to work with this particular person. If you notice there was a loud sound and they went, ooh, and they really just flinched at it, you know they're not going to be someone who's going to cope with loud sounds too much. So you go, okay, what can I do in the workplace to ensure this person who I think is great can work with us, even though they have a problem with loud sounds? We need to work on how to reduce that impact on them, or perhaps, put them in a place where those loud sounds won't be quite as impactful or quite as noticeable. Look at things like how they respond to your use of language. Understanding that if you use a particular pronoun, for instance, there might be a trigger there that doesn't really sit great with them. And I've got some examples of that kind of stuff coming up. Critical thinking, the ability for people to be able to look at themselves with some sort of critique, not just look at the reciting a slogan. So many people get into, oh, you know how it is, and things like, oh, that was a really good one I heard the other day. It was like, oh, that's the way the cookie crumbles. Or people who use those throwaway lines to not actually provide any kind of depth of thinking about a situation. So if you ask them, well, the lockdown that recently happened in our town, how do you go with all that? Oh, well, I guess that's the way the cookie crumbles. It's bound to happen to us at one stage. So I guess we had to do what we had to do. That doesn't tell you anything about them or their ability to critically think. And you can go, the answer that you might be looking for is something a bit more in depth that goes, it really affected some people very deeply. Some people really don't cope with being told to sit still in one place. Other people completely rebel against it. So we saw some real problems with people not complying and being quite disobedient with it because they simply thought it was unfair. And at the other end, you've got people who are really compliant with it and did everything they possibly could. So the effect of something like a lockdown is really multifaceted and it's quite nuanced, that not everyone's going to cope with it the way that others do. And the majority seem to be okay and can cope with it as long as they can see a possible end date for it. So that's when you see that people are able to think critically, not just throwaway lines that sort of don't tell you anything at all. It shows that they haven't even thought about it. A positive attitude says every bit as much as what their answer does. Someone who's able to answer positively and able to look at that glass half full method rather than the glass half empty is able to show you that they've done probably a bit of personal development work on themselves to ensure that they can be more resilient about things that happen around them in workplaces, but in life as well, rather than being affected by every little thing that happens to them and reacting constantly through their lives. That is a lot. Body language, things like the mouth is saying yes, but the arms are saying no. This one's like, yes, I really, really enjoy doing that. It's telling you they don't really enjoy doing that and they don't feel comfortable talking about it. So notice how this seating position can change when a question's asked that is a bit more probing about them. Some people don't like probes. Watch for narrowing eyes that indicate, that sort of one, if you can see my camera picture, doesn't quite understand something. So if you see those narrowing eyes, you go, they don't really quite understand what I'm saying here, so I may need to explain it more clearly. Twitch eating using fidgets are not just a way of people showing discomfort, but should show some neurodiversity as well. Some people need to have something in their hands. I'm not neurodiverse, but I often will pick up this little blue rock that I was given by a client, and I'll, sometimes when I need to have a bit more of a think about things, I'll put this in my hand as a bit of a crutch, I suppose, to let me know that to silence my mind from other things and help me focus on things I want to focus on. That's a bit about, I guess, mindfulness. Triggers and emotional intelligence, something like when she referred to me as her, I just kind of died. Be aware of how someone identifies themselves. Often when they meet you, they'll say, my name's Aaron Waterflower, and my pronouns are they, them, and theirs. So you understand that when you're not referring to them as she or her, you're referring to them as them. You refer to them as the gender neutral thing. Just understand that's important to some people. It's not up for you as an employer to judge that. In fact, it's the opposite. You don't get to judge that. You don't get to make a decision about that. That's their life, the way they want to live. That's something that you need to get used to. So be aware of it, and use the pronouns they've actually put out there, because it shows respect. Watch for awkward moments around cultural references and voice tone. So make sure that when you have that voice tone, it's suddenly very, very loud, and if people sort of backing like, oh, that's really, really aggressive, understand that could be a cultural thing of someone, or it could be someone's trauma from the past. Understand that you're talking to a human here, not to a robot. Not everyone has the same experiences in life. So if you're able to communicate to someone who has had some trauma in their life, you may not know that, but you'll notice it very, very early on in an interview. And okay, I'm just going to pull it back a bit. I'm just going to wind that one back a little bit more, just to communicate in a bit more of a neutral tone that is not as threatening. And understand inclusive language. We, us, rather than you, me, that kind of thing, and how to approach people who are diverse from different backgrounds. Sometimes people don't feel great about the whole idea of our tight little intimate team. They'll think of intimate as a word that they don't really like. But you go out, we have a tight team that really knows how to pull together and help each other to get the job done, is better than saying we're a tight, intimate team. Because then that says, I don't want to be intimate with the people I work with. I don't want to tell them about my life. That may not be what you're saying, but maybe how it's received. The critical thinking is he couldn't just explain why he felt that way. So it's where people have some degree of self-awareness of their own strengths and challenges. That shows a level of maturity, particularly emotional maturity. Being unable to provide a clear answer shows a lack of critical thinking ability. And it shows someone who just sort of bumbles and stumbles through life and doesn't really think about consequences, doesn't really think about things. So they tend to be very easy to sort of put out of your mind in an interview, because they don't tend to stand for anything. And when you stand when you don't stand for something, you actually stand for nothing. And that's just a really boring person. And having the ability to assess another point of view and provide a clear response, that's the sign of a good critical thinker. So let's wrap it all up. And we look at how you conduct a successful interview. You do it by creating a list of questions and topics you're going to bring into that interview. You'll also ask the right kinds of questions. We had a whole bunch of them there. Gathering the necessary information about the candidate before you walk in there, and assessing the applicant based on skills and experience. Plus, you're looking things like attitude, emotional intelligence, and that all-important critical thinking, someone who actually thinks but doesn't just float through life. If you'd like to know more about this, you can contact me through these details on the screen, dante@treaty.com.au. You can also stalk me as much as you like on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, and whatever it takes to get you, I guess, to the point where you feel safe doing these things. There's tons of other advice you can find online about conducting interviews. I hope that what I've been able to produce has at least added to your knowledge levels and your confidence of going forward as a small business owner who's able to interview people more effectively, and I guess get that candidate you really want to get. So you don't want to be stuck with someone that really, I guess, doesn't work for you. My name's Dante St James, and I hope to see you in the next one.